First at 5. 10 News with Ron Wilson and Jessica Rowe.
Tonight, the first strike. Cruise missiles rain on Baghdad.
George Bush orders his troops to take out Saddam.
Good evening. Australia is tonight at war. At 1:45 this afternoon, dozens of cruise missiles were launched at Iraq in a preemptive strike to kill Saddam Hussein. Half an hour later, US President George Bush addressed the world, saying he would not accept any outcome but victory.
This is the moment it began. 42 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from US warships in the Persian Gulf. Their target, a site near Baghdad. Despite the build-up, it was still a surprise attack, launched early after US intelligence detected Iraqi leaders, possibly even Saddam Hussein himself, were in the area. They dubbed it a decapitation strike.
If it turns out that Saddam Hussein is dead or he doesn't appear anywhere, that could completely change how this war would unfold. It could turn it into a peaceful intervention. It could certainly break the back of the will of the Iraqi army to fight. So the key point now for the next 24 hours is to figure out what happened.
Hours later, he appeared on Iraqi TV, although it's believed his statement was pre-recorded.
Iraq will be victorious, will win. And with Iraq, our nation and humanity will win. And evil will suffer.
Flashes of anti-aircraft fire began ringing out over Baghdad in the pre-dawn silence. Stealth bombers leaving from secret bases in the Gulf to attack key military targets on the ground. Then, just as the sun began to rise over the Iraqi capital, on the other side of the world, the official announcement came in a few chilling words from a White House spokesman.
Opening stages of the disarmament of the Iraqi regime have begun. The President will address the nation at 10:15.
Baghdad, a city of 5 million people, looked more like a ghost town, with just an occasional car creeping through the streets. But many do remain, bunkered down watching the attacks on local news services. The media, already playing a key role, the global television audience learnt about the attack before the troops in Kuwait, who were told by reporters. Alison Blanksby, 10 News.
And this is what it looked like in the Gulf itself, on board the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln.
To be seen. I want to bring in CNN's Kira Phillips. She's aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. Kira, tell our viewers what you can about what you're seeing and what they're doing aboard that carrier right now.
All right, Wolf, I can barely hear you, but I'm going to try and give you as much information as possible right now. I can tell you that I can confirm that Operation Southern Watch is over. Right now, the strike fighters here on USS Abraham Lincoln and other supporting aircraft are in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Earlier, about within 45 minutes ago, we showed you F-14s, the F-14 Tomcatters launching off the carrier. Those pilots indeed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom now. This conflict with Iraq is moving quicker. The tempo is building up. Right now you're seeing a shot of an F-18 getting ready to launch off the U.S. Abraham Lincoln here. As you can see, it's an integration of a number of squadrons. The first to go were the F-14s. Now the F-18s are starting to get into the mix.
And as the war unfolds, the Pentagon is planning the next stage. US correspondent Deborah Knight is in Washington. Deb, what we've seen so far has been very contained. When are we going to see the full invasion?
Well, Ron, the President did make it very clear tonight that this was the opening stage, the opening salvo of what will be a shock and awe campaign delivered by the US military and coalition forces, and it is now being dubbed Operation Iraqi Freedom. But as we have seen tonight, the US President is poised to act at any time, as are his military forces. The US President did take the decision to act tonight shortly after an extraordinary meeting that was called urgently at the White House. He was told that there was a window of opportunity that would be lost if he did not act quickly after the ultimatum expired for Saddam Hussein to actually leave Iraq. He did act very swiftly indeed. 90 minutes later, this attack did occur. and we have seen 40 cruise missiles which did land on a site just outside of Baghdad. The President himself has retired for the evening, but the Situation Room is humming. And we will hear whether or not that complete campaign has started from the President when he does emerge from the White House tomorrow morning. But around 10 or 12 hours is the word we're getting.
Deb, what's the word out of the Pentagon there where you are at the moment? Are they claiming this aerial attack, this initial attack, as a success?
No word yet, but we are seeing the Saddam Hussein, the Iraqi leader, appearing on Iraqi television. Not sure whether or not that is live or whether it was pre-recorded, but it was dubbed a decapitation strike, as we are hearing. So it's not necessarily targeting Saddam Hussein himself. It could also have been targeting his sons or key members of the Iraqi military leadership. So we're not sure whether or not it is a success, but again, we will hear that directly probably from the President when he does arise tomorrow morning.
Thanks, Deb. That's Deborah Knight, our reporter in Washington. Well, in the next 24 hours, the Allied assault on Iraq is expected to begin. This is how it's expected to happen. American troops backed by battle tanks will push into Iraq and move swiftly towards Baghdad. The US 1st Marine and the UK 1st Armoured are expected to cross the border a little later as part of a third offensive. The US 101st Airborne Division will parachute into northern Iraq and open a second front. Both the American paratroopers and British commandos will try to secure Iraq's vast oil reserves. In the coming days, Allied forces are expected to pound the country, targeting suspected weapons of mass destruction. Intelligence reports suggest there are a number of active sites still producing biological, chemical and possibly nuclear weapons.
Shortly after the opening shots of Operation Iraqi Freedom were fired, President Bush made a sobering television appearance. He said the United States would use no half measures, but warned Americans the campaign could be long and difficult.
On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
With bombs already raining on Baghdad, the US president addressed his people. A calm, calculated speech predicting victory and promising decisive force.
We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police and doctors on the streets of our cities.
Much of the speech talked directly to the armed forces.
The peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you. That trust is well placed.
It seems that the war of aggression against my country started.
In New York's Times Square, the speech and opening shots were broadcast live, shoppers and commuters stopping in the street to watch.
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking, but I think it's something we have to do as a country. And hopefully there's not going to be any retaliation in the United States with the terrorist attack.
During his speech, the president warned Americans that the campaign in Iraq may be a much longer one than many are predicting, but he said the US would accept nothing short of victory.
We will pass through this time of peril and carry on the work of peace. We will defend our freedom. We will bring freedom to others, and we will prevail. May God bless our country and all who defend her.
In the United States, Max Futcher, 10 News.
And joining us now is 10's political editor Paul Bongiorno. And Paul, the Prime Minister confirmed in Parliament today our involvement in the war.
That's right, Jessica. The news of the hostilities breaking out was just before question time, and Opposition Leader Simon Crean, in his first question, asked Mr Howard what our troops would be involved in, what activities they'd be involved in. And this was Mr Howard's answer.
Prime Minister. Well, Mr Speaker, for operational and security reasons, which I ask the House and the public to accept and understand, I cannot give any specific details, but I can inform the House and inform the Australian public in general that forces have commenced combat and combat support operations.
The cries of shame came from the opposition benches and from the public galleries, a sure sign of the divisions in Australia over our war commitment.
And has there been any detail given on the involvement of our troops?
Well, you could say, Jessica, that about an hour and a half later, the Prime Minister called a short news conference to answer Simon Crean's question. He revealed that our ships in the Gulf were now on combat support duty. He wouldn't say what our special forces were up to, but it is known that their specialty is deep reconnaissance behind enemy lines and into Iraq. And he was more forthcoming on what our fighter jets were doing.
The FA-18 Hornet aircraft have started operations over Iraq. They're conducting missions to escort high-value coalition tanker and airborne early warning and control aircraft.
Mr Howard will hold a cabinet meeting tomorrow to review developments, and he says he will be staying in the national capital across the weekend. Back to you.
Thank you, Paul. Buongiorno in Canberra.
Prime Minister Howard will defend his decision to go to war in a nationally televised address tonight. The opposition has branded our involvement as reckless and says it will make Australia more of a terrorist target.
United in prayer but divided on war. John Howard and Simon Crean began the day in church with defence dignitaries, the Governor-General and military families. They prayed for God's blessing on our troops.
We ask for God's blessing upon them in their planning and decision-making.
Just 2 hours later, the bombing in Baghdad had started. Tonight, in a televised address to the nation, the Prime Minister will defend his decision to send 2,000 Australian men and women to war.
The government has decided to commit Australian forces to action to disarm Iraq because we believe it is right, it is lawful, and it's in Australia's national interest.
Mr Howard says it's only a matter of time before the weapons of mass destruction get into the hands of terrorists.
Or the possession of chemical, biological, or even worse still, nuclear weapons by a terrorist network would be a direct, undeniable and lethal threat to Australia and its people.
But the battle has begun with Australia divided. 2 war veterans handing back their medals in a public display of protest. Mr Crean learnt the strikes had started while giving an address to the National Press Club.
We are now involved in a conflict that we should never have been in, and we're going to become a target as a consequence of it.
The opposition has finally released its legal advice, which supports its view that war is illegal, but our troops are not at fault.
It's the government's decision that's wrong, unauthorised and illegal, but it's not the activities of the troops that are illegal.
The government believes there are 15 Australians still in Iraq, 12 are in Baghdad. The chances of them leaving now look remote. Late this afternoon, the Senate voted to bring the troops home, while in the lower house, the government used its numbers to support the decision for war. Leonie Mellor, 10 News.
Our coverage of the war in Iraq continues in a moment. You're watching 10 News.
"7:30 tonight. Their greatest fears are coming alive. But could the biggest threat be each other?
Maybe it's me, it's your sister.
An all-new Charmed. 7:30 tonight on 10.
Australia's newest car company has arrived. GM Daewoo is here. And to celebrate, you can get a great deal on the Daewoo Takuma. Save $1,000 on the previous recommended retail price. Takuma has a sporty 2-litre engine, air conditioning, dual airbags, Italian good looks, power steering windows and mirrors, and plenty of room for all the family. All this for $23,990 for the manual 5-door plus on-road costs. Hurry into your local GM Daewoo dealership now for this great Takuma offer.
Only the finest ingredients help make a great Sunday. Wake up to the Sun Herald.
Well, it's the first game of the year, Warren. Everyone's invited.
Everyone?
Everyone.
John Howard.
Yep.
Bob Hawke.
Yep.
The Crocodile Hunter.
Yep.
That little fat kid from Hey Dad.
Yep.
Anna Gionis.
Of the Bondi or Blacktown Geolysis.
Sydney versus Carlton, March 29. A community celebration at Telstra Stadium.
Kerry Ann Kennelly.
Oh, yep.
Here are the Pantene winners. Who are they?
I've got 2 young children, so I'm on the go all the time. We're always in the pool or outside. It was dull and lifeless. Well, my mum uses Pantene, so I thought I'd try it just to enter the competition. Now look at it, it really worked. It's so shiny. It feels like I've just coloured it. Well, I always thought I had nice hair, but with Pantene, it's gorgeous hair.
Vodafone Super 12 Rugby. Show your true colours.
The brilliant Veleda Super Mop has been improved to clean floors even better. Better? It now has a unique microfiber cleaning zone. These high-performance microfibers lift away the most stubborn dirt, giving an easier clean. Plus, a drier floor. Veleda Super Mop Microfiber Plus cleans deeper and dries faster.
A game of seduction.
Happy hunting, Sebastian.
An unsuspecting victim.
Shall be my greatest victory.
The ultimate prize.
I'm the only person you can't have and it kills you.
Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Phillippe, Reese Witherspoon, Cruel Intentions, Friday.
And 10, Sean Fewings joins us on the line from Kuwait City. Now, Sean, those sandstorms are still causing problems there. What sort of effect will that have on the main attack that's yet to be launched on Iraq?
Jessica, generals often talk about the fog of war. Well, here in the Persian Gulf, we've got it literally. Not since the rain clouds over Normandy in 1944 have we seen weather conditions having such an impact on any possible invasion. At the moment, we've got some 150,000 Allied troops manning the small Kuwaiti border with Iraq, just waiting for the word from the Pentagon as to whether they'll cut through those fences and enter Iraqi territory. The situation here with these sandstorms refusing to go away, and with some more on the horizon due sometime today or tomorrow, it could delay the Pentagon's decision to move the ground troops in there. By the same token, if they leave the troops where they are, they could be vulnerable to missile, rocket or artillery attack. So the situation here is everything's up to the Pentagon. They'll get word through from the Pentagon and General Tommy Franks in Qatar, and the troops will move at any chosen moment. It won't pose too much problem for the forward elements of that invasion force. The Bradley fighting vehicles and the M1A1 Abrams tanks have thermal imaging capability, so they can see through this dust storm, but it's the engineers that will work around them looking for mines, and the backup troops in the trucks, the convoy, 26-kilometre convoy of trucks behind them that might have trouble in any dust storm. So the situation regarding the aircraft, jets of course can fly over this sandstorm, but they will be unable to take out any targets that might be lased or that laser is the term that they use. The ground troops, the special forces troops already behind Allied lines may well be utilising laser beams, putting them onto targets, and the jets will then hone in on those laser signals and take the targets out. They may not have that capability now with the sandstorm that's hitting the region.
Now, given the delay, what sort of ground activity is going on at the moment?
The ground activity, as I said, the main invasion force is biding its time, waiting in that no man's land known as the demilitarised zone, the 9 miles or so between Iraq and Kuwait. They're waiting for orders. Here in Kuwait City itself, we're also under the midst of a sandstorm, if you like. It's refusing to dissipate. Right now, that could pose problems for the Kuwaiti people. They're worried about a retaliatory attack by Saddam Hussein. To combat that, or to give advance warning of that, they've deployed Czech and German nuclear, biological and chemical teams, which are roving the streets here 24/7, just determining whether there's any change in the air particles. Now, if the sandstorm continues to persist, then they may have problems detecting any change in the atmosphere in the event of a chemical attack. So that could cause problems.
Thank you, reporter Sean Fewings on the line from Kuwait City.
On the ground, the Allied invasion is poised to storm into Iraq. 300,000 troops are in Fort Assembly areas as battle plans are being finalised.
B-52 bombers stationed in England loaded with cruise missiles and ready to deliver their deadly payload. And nothing, it seems, will stop the Allies' aerial assault.
We've got laser-guided bombs for the nice days, but for days such as this, where there might be difficulty seeing the target accurately, we've got GPS-guided bombs that are much more accurate than the GPS in your day-to-day car, and that means we can be accurate and therefore reduce the risk to civilian casualties.
But on the ground, the blinding sandstorm starts the Allied advance.
We got to follow the vehicles in front of us, on most convoys, and as the dust storms kick up, if they get more than 20 meters away from you, it's hard to see them.
The majority of US troops are now in the demilitarised zone between Kuwait and Iraq. Forward assembly areas set up, field hospitals erected, troops undergoing last-minute revisions on how to rescue casualties from the battlefield. Others patiently lining up, sometimes for more than 4 hours, to call home for the last time before they go into war.
I told you I'm not going to die, so don't worry.
At sea, the commander of the 5th Fleet, Vice Admiral Timothy Keating, telling sailors it's almost time.
Clock's ticking. Diplomatic efforts have failed. Now we are prepared to expend every measure to win the war.
In nearby Kuwait, there's panic on the streets, scuffles erupting at the airport as foreign residents struggle to board the last flights out of the city ahead of the invasion. Eddie Meyer, 10 News.
Back home, major protests against the war have been planned across the country. 10 reporter Kevin Wild is at a demonstration that is underway in Sydney. Now, Kevin, what is the feeling there at the moment?
I'd have to say, Jessica, a mixture of anger, sadness and also regret that we've got to this stage now where we've got the conflict actually underway. Many of the people who are here today, there are more than 5,000 people who have been at many of the rallies that we've seen, particularly on weekends here and across the country. And they will be hearing speakers over the next half an hour or so, and you can see that the crowd is obviously very big at the moment. They will also head down towards the Prime Minister's office in Phillip Street. Some of the protesters are very angry, even at the media, in terms of getting the story out in terms of the situation. A volatile situation, the police are here in force.
And Kevin, what other protests are planned?
There will be another major rally on Sunday, and it's really a matter of, obviously on the weekend, more people are able to come along at this time. At this particular rally, the Greens, the Democrats and the Labor Party are the major people to get people along. And obviously the feeling against the war for many people has not abated, even though the war has begun.
Thank you. Kevin Wild in the city. And as our troops in the Gulf go into combat, the government has announced they'll be handsomely paid for risking their lives in war.
The military have dubbed the strike on Iraq Operation Falconer, and those involved have been awarded generous conditions. For the 2,000 Australian Defence Force personnel now deployed, the wages of war will include all salary and allowances tax-free. Plus, those deployed inside Iraq will receive a $200 a day danger allowance. Those outside Iraq, $125 a day. Our Navy personnel enforcing the embargo against Iraq in Iraqi territorial waters, and our pilots who enter Iraqi airspace will also qualify for the danger money. But while the pay conditions are good, the physical conditions are hostile in every conceivable way, including the weather. In the past few days, winds up to 65 kilometres an hour and furious dust storms.
Visibility has been down to as little as 70 metres, and flying conditions have been tough for both fixed and rotary wing aircraft.
As in all wars, accurate, up-to-date information is likely to be hard to come by. Unlike their American counterpart, our Defence Department has signalled that it won't comment on specific active operations by our forces until they're well and truly over.
Of course, we don't talk about current or future operations for obvious operational security reasons, and the specific preparations that are underway fall into this area.
Greg Turnbull, 10 News.
Today's attack is breaking the hearts of Iraqis now living in Australia. Although they want to see Saddam Hussein overthrown, they're desperately pleading for the world to find another way.
They play the games of children, blissfully unaware of the events unfolding half a world away. Rose was herself just a child the first time the skies over Baghdad erupted in flames and fury back in 1991.
Waiting for the bombs to come and wondering if we're going to wake up the next morning.
Now it's the turn of their extended families still in Baghdad to cling to life as they await the worst from two likely enemies.
Allied bombardment and also from Saddam retaliation.
If he feels, oh, this sector or that section is not loyal to him.
For weeks, the Al Salami family has tried to make contact with loved ones in Iraq, all to no avail.
So we can't do anything. We'll just have to pray for them to be safe.
Their only news from their former homeland, terrifying reports from the world's media.
And British and American troops have moved into forward positions along the Iraqi border, ready for an invasion.
You just imagine, someone going to bomb Sydney, how do you feel about it? And you can't do anything, can you?
And even as the skies again flare over Baghdad, this cry from a young woman half a world away for a country she admits she knows nothing about.
War on Iraq as an answer to get rid of Saddam Hussein? No way.
Tim Collins, 10 News.
Well, actually, there is something you can do to help. Care Australia has launched an appeal for the Iraqi people caught up in the war. Money raised will go to supplying food, water and medicine for families left in despair after the attacks are over. You can call this number 1800 020 046. 1800 020 046. Well, Tim Bailey, we've talked about a lot about the dust storms over in Kuwait and Iraq over the last few days. Tonight we've even had one over Sydney as well.
Yes, indeed, Ron. They generated out in Western New South Wales today and have caused chronic pollution levels in Sydney. Best illustrated by Skywatch as we go up to the roof of the 10 News Centre. You can see we started off nice and blue, but then the dust storms blew in and illustrated again by our pollution maps. And you can see high readings in the west and medium levels on the east. Tomorrow, a better day on the way, a bit cooler, 25 degrees, mainly clear and sunny. Back on the TV in around about 10 to update you.
Thank you, Tim. You're watching 10 News. The rest of the day's news is next.